Welcome back. It's episode 49 of the In the 11 podcast. I am your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the podcast where we bring on people from all over the footballing world to show you what it takes to truly be in the 11. This week is no different. We have a professional player on who has experience both abroad in Ireland, some trials in Austria early on in his career, as well as now he's made quite a career for himself over here in the United States in the USL League One. Jake Keegan is joining us in the 11 today, and it is chock full of great stuff via his story. I also mentioned in the podcast that you should go, if you want to hear a little bit more in depth about his journey throughout his career, go out and check the Footwork podcast, and you can hear his story kind of from start to finish, all the stops along the way. In this episode, we kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of those different stops along his path, and it's makes for a great episode. So without further ado, here is Jake. All right, everybody, in the 11 with us this week is Jake Keegan. Thanks so much for taking some time to hop in with us and chat a little bit about your career. I guess the first order of business is congratulations on re-signing and returning back to the Greenville Triumph. So congrats, my friend.
Thank you so much. First, thanks so much for having me on. It's, as a fellow podcaster, ex-podcast host, I know how hard and how difficult it can be. But yeah, I asked Greenville if they could announce the signing just in time for our interview today. So the timing was perfect. It wasn't
breaking news.
Yeah, I actually asked if I could do it on this podcast, but they're like, no, let's relax. So.
Yeah, let's let our social media guys handle that before you go some random podcast from nowhere that nobody knows about. But talk to us a little bit about the decision. I'm sure we'll get into this as we go through the episode here, but you were previously with the Triumph, then left to join Madison, and now you're coming on back. So maybe take us from, that first stint in Greenville to maybe what led you to leave and now coming on back home.
Geez, that's a deep question. We're getting very personal very early. Well, first, the first 2 years in Greenville they were awesome, unbelievable. Like the first year we lost in the final, probably could have easily won. The second year we won it. And at that point, I was just kind of like, sometimes you get to a point where you just want something new. There are obviously other factors in play, but it's like, I had always been places for like 2 years for the most part. I was in like Edmonton for 2 years, Galway for 2 years, and this Greenville was then for 2 years. So I was just kind of like, all right. And part of the reason why I do this is to see new places, visit new people, learn new things from different cultures, which is not so much different in Madison to Greenville, although maybe it was this past year. But in general, it's not. It's more, when you put yourself in uncomfortable positions, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn new things from other people. So that was kind of my thought process then. If I look back now, was it the wrong decision? Yeah, probably. But that doesn't mean I regret it, because I still learned things that I wouldn't have learned if I had stayed in Greenville. And it was still a great, valuable, I don't know, great is the right word, but it was a valuable experience for me. And I take it, and it also gave me a greater appreciation for the club of Greenville. And when I compared the two, there's really, not to take any shots at Madison, but there's no comparison. Greenville, they won't always win every game, but the way they take care of their players, the way how professional the coaching staff is, the supporters are excellent. I love the city of Greenville, the area, and at the end of the day, it gave me the appreciation for what I was missing. And then I called John up. I was like, "Please, I'm sorry," and he said, "Yeah, let's come on. You can come back."
Well, I'm sure that was nice to hear. Yeah, come on back home. But you're happy to open the doors for you again.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody, you want to be wanted. And in this game, especially when you get to be like a little bit older, like I am now, doors aren't always open. It's a little bit tougher. It's tough in general, but it gets to be tougher as you get older. And to be wanted by a club that I had turned down the previous year, it feels great. And I'm happy to, again, be a part of the family.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned something interesting in there that I've heard this is sometimes a thing with managers as well, that they feel as if when they join a new club, they often think of it in kind of projects, right? And in terms of maybe a 2 to 3 year stint. It sounds like maybe maybe whether you did it on purpose or not, like this is maybe how you kind of modeled your career a little bit, and feeling like from a footballing perspective as well, besides just culturally and experiencing new places, maybe is that something that you've been cognizant of, hey, this is a project for me in terms of my football, and then let me find somewhere new, or maybe not quite so deliberate?
It's a bit of both. I mean, I definitely, there's part of me is like, Greenville could be a place that maybe I live long term, and it's not just, I mean, from a project from my personal perspective, in terms of like, this could be a place where after I finish playing, I can have things set up X, Y, Z. So like from a personal perspective, absolutely. But I mean, it's funny you say project. It's something that John, the first year, would say often. He considered, because that was our first year in 2019. And he was like, this is a project. This is something we want to win, but we want to grow the club the right way. And we want to make it sustainable. And we want to engrave ourselves into the community and all the things that you have to do as a lower division club. And yeah, I think as players, especially at that level, like we have a huge responsibility, because you see these clubs, they fizzle out in a year or 2, 3 years, oftentimes. And I mean, it's not the player's fault, but a lot of times the owner just gets tired and sick of it. And one way you can make sure that, as long as they have enough cash flow, like that they're not sick of it, that they feel like the players respect them, they appreciate them. And it works both ways, of course, but like the ownership, the coaching staff, the players, we should all be one. And that's when you talk about a project, that's really how I see it.
Yeah. So how is your mindset about going into a project like this, or into a new contract, into a new team, changed over the course of your career? You know, when you were first starting out, and like many players, it's just, I need to find somewhere who will give me a chance, right? Who will give me a look and allow me to play. Obviously now you're in a different phase of your career where you've established yourself, you've proven that you could play at this level. So those conversations become very different. Like, what would you say, is a difference between the Jake that's looking for a contract when he's 22 versus the Jake now?
I mean, one thing cut and dry is like, you always want to win, especially when you're younger. But I think the one thing that younger players don't always realize, they come into these new clubs, like this was me in Galway, Germany, whatever, 2013, 2014. You come in and you're like, and because like you said, we want to just get a chance. We want to be seen, do well, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times players, and I probably was guilty of this too, like they have this one track mentality of how can I look good? And that is important, because when you look good, it does help the team for the most part. But what people don't realize is you can have the best year of your career. A lot of times, if your team lost, you're going to be punished for it in some way. Maybe you'll still get a contract. Maybe you'll still move up to the next level, but it wouldn't be as great if you were in a club that won. Like for instance, last year in Greenville, like I had a pretty good year, but it wasn't amazing, but I was sought after as a attacking player from the team that won the title, and Madison signed me. Some other teams were interested, and I didn't even have the greatest year that year. So I think that a lot needs to be like, that needs to be part of the mindset for players more. How can I help the team win? Because when we win, then it's better for everyone.
Yeah. Winning begets success for players, and vice versa. Exactly like you said. I'm at a bit of an advantage here because obviously I'm a fan of the Footwork podcast as well. I know you did your kind of whole, story from start to finish. So for anyone who's listening now, I would definitely encourage you to go check out Jake's episode there. And if you haven't listened to those guys, they're fantastic. So we won't do the whole thing from start to finish.
The longest episode ever with those guys. So.
I know, I was looking at it and I was like, I think it's over 2 hours. Like, you guys definitely got into it. But...
We got to the point where we were just shooting the shit. We weren't even talking.
So, obviously we know based on that episode, Binghamton, playing PDL in the summers, and then kind of the opportunity to, so you were drafted by the Union, but obviously that didn't quite go according to plan. And I find as if this is often a common theme with any player that I've talked to that has some sort of experience with the draft, whether, they think they're a shoo-in to be drafted and then they're never called, or they don't even expect it. And then, they find out they're drafted, but it really amounts to nothing. So again, maybe just to hammer this point home for the listeners, like what really is the MLS draft? Maybe even you can describe what it was like when you were drafted versus what it is even now.
Yeah. So I can't comment as much on what it is now. I know the value of it has probably decreased. There's fewer rounds. I don't even know. I think they still do the combine, but I'm not quite sure about that. Mm-hmm. But it does seem like fewer and fewer teams are actually signing those draft picks to contracts, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it shows that the quality of the league is improving, and also the homegrowns. Like clubs just don't have the need. They have these guys, they're homegrowns. Yeah. They have the guys that they're signing. And the homegrowns are basically taking the opportunities from the college kids, the guys who would be in the draft or who they are drafting. I mean, of course, there's still stories. But like back when I was, it was kind of phasing its way out. I would say I was somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I think there was, at that time, there was 2 rounds in the MLS Super Draft. And then there was 4 in the supplemental, which for all intents and purposes was like rounds 3 through 6 of the Super Draft. Like, I don't know why they call it something else, but yeah. So I was drafted in that supplemental range. So I was a lower round pick, and at the end of the day, it's just a trial. So it's an I mean, I think maybe like 10 guys are signed before the draft, and everyone after that is invite to preseason. And you go there in preseason, just like you would in overseas, just like you would even USL or anywhere. You go there and you're given an opportunity, and it could last a day, it could last 4 weeks. And in my case, I mean, I was young. I relied on some information that wasn't necessarily completely accurate. But I mean, again, it's not something. I don't think it would have changed my life hugely if I had gone. Maybe it would have. Who knows? But I decided, because it was a trial, and I felt like there were a lot of players in my position at the Union at that time, similar type players. I was like, all right, I'll go try, because I had another opportunity in Israel. Yep. And same thing, like a trial, probably slightly higher level, maybe, but very comparable. And I decided to go to Israel just for like I've been talking about when leaving Greenville. Like, it's a new experience. It's new culture, new style of play and all that. And I just took a chance, went. And I mean, I didn't last very long. I was there like 3 weeks, and then they were Maccabi Haifa, which was the team I was training with. They were like, "We're not going to sign you," the typical conversation. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I could have gone to preseason with the Union, and it could have been the exact same conversation after 2 weeks. Listen, we're not going to sign you. It would have been the exact same position I was in Israel. So, I mean, when you get to that point, you just have to make decisions and go with your gut and hope it works out. But
yeah,
there's a lot of decisions, and they're not always right. That's just how life is.
Yeah. Especially in this game, it's all just about following your gut and then adapting, once you get somewhere. Like, I'm sure the people that you met in Israel and just the experience of going over to Europe probably changed your whole perspective of the world football landscape. Would you say, kind of now looking back, if you had to maybe make a bit of a blueprint for yourself for those players who are on the fringe in the United States, they're not a players coming up through the academy and getting opportunities with the first team, or, they're not a top 10 pick in the draft or anything like that. Is Europe maybe a route that they should pursue, do you think?
I mean, I would say, because MLS is growing so much and the opportunities are there, I would say, I mean, if you're a senior in college, let's say you're just did well, you want All-American or whatever, but you're not a top prospect, I would say go through the draft, but also have your backup plans in place. And a lot of times guys go overseas, whether it be their sophomore, junior year, or somewhere like that in the summer.
Yep.
Have these training experiences, talk to people, meet people, speak to agents, speak to your friends, maybe who play overseas, and have these conversations. And then if an MLS team wants to bring you to preseason, and you don't have something better, of course, go, duh. And it could work out, and you could be an example of someone who it works out great for, and you end up with a 10-year career in MLS. And then, I mean, you're not going to do much better than that. I mean, that's a great career. But you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. That's the biggest thing. You have to keep knocking down doors, keep asking different questions of people, and hopefully eventually someone will like you enough to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I remember listening to you say it was one of the things that you try and do each off season is kind of gather as many opportunities as you can, and then, go from a position where you can choose. You have a little bit more autonomy of whatever you want to do next. And that's, in the beginning, that's a tough thing to get for yourself, but that's what every player is kind of trying to aspire to, is can I get as many opportunities for myself and then be able to choose a little bit what I want to do?
Yeah, it's difficult, but at the same time, if you want to play at a certain level, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
But as you know, like in Europe, there's leagues and Germany has 14 divisions or something. You can get an opportunity. As if you play college soccer, you're good enough to get an opportunity somewhere. Now, is it a professional, quote unquote, professional level? Not necessarily, but over in Europe, it's much more like you can go play in the 8th division, and if you do well, like a Vardy story or or a Conte or like those are the outliers. But if you do well there, then you'll have a chance in the 5th division, and then if you do well there, then you have a chance in the 3rd, and then the 3rd in Bundesliga is an incredible level. So it's really, for me, it's a lot about just what are you willing to go do. Like if you have a girlfriend or you have like Dylan, for instance, was it JP Morgan?
Yeah.
He had if you want that comfortable life, then don't do it. So, but if you want to go sleep in a 1-bedroom apartment with 3 guys in Germany and have that be your life for a little bit, then anybody really can go do it if you played in college.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you've already mentioned Germany, because I was also a member of FC Darmstadt. So I can imagine we have some stories that you were there when the team was at a little bit of a higher level, but I'm sure that there's some things that overlap there. And
we were the Blazers. So I think what happened is they treated us actually very well, because we were the first. There was only 4 of us, or 3 at first, and the 4th one came late. And then once they saw us, they were like, "Oh, these guys can play." And then there was more and more that came. But then it got to a point where I'm sure when you were there was probably like 12 Americans, and plus youth kids. And then it got to a point like they just didn't have any infrastructure to house everybody, and then it became a shit show, which is where the stories come in. But
yeah. But I mean, by the time I was there, it was essentially we were a completely foreign team. I think we had like 2 German guys in the first team or the reserves, and the rest was tons of Brazilian guys, 1 or 2 from scattered around Europe, and then a bunch of Americans as well. But it was just funny when I heard you say something like, they were trying to build apartments at the training facility for FCA. And I remember, because probably before you had even seen or known what they were going to be like, and you were like, and that would be good. And I was like, listening, I'm like, live there. Not exactly the best, but
did you live on the ones? So we had a 2-bedroom one. It was like the first, when you come down the driveway, it's like the first one. Those were like the nicest ones. But then they built another ones like above the kitchen. Those are like the no airflow, and we never there, thankfully.
Yeah. So they have like it was a strange setup. There was like a house sort of at the end where you came into the parking lot, and there was a couple players that stayed there. There was another house in town that a couple other players stayed in. And then a bunch of us also stayed in that building that was like, the bottom floor of it was the locker room and the storage facility for gear. And then you went up this little like corner set of stairs, and so many players are living up there. Started off, like, I remember you said something about, are you prepared to live in a room without a window? Like that was me for the first month when I was in Germany. But that's why I feel like it's important to share these stories, because players have to kind of know, especially if you're coming from somewhere in college. Like even Binghamton, the facilities that you had at Binghamton, I'm sure would not even compare to what you then go over to, you're playing Verbandsliga or Oberliga in Germany, and you're like, what is going on here? So it's important for players to really understand what they're getting into.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't expect it to be all like shiny new facilities, nice weight room, great facilities like dining hall food. It's not like that. And if you don't want that, I mean, that's totally fine. Like, respect. Go live your life in the city, do whatever you want to do, make your money. Like, that's a perfectly fine life. But a lot of guys, I think, they come in with this almost entitlement, and they show up to Germany and they're like, "Oh, why is this not good? Why is this not good?" And it's like, well, this is what you signed up for. This is it. So either embrace it and enjoy yourself, or just leave. But don't be negative about it, and don't ruin the experience for the other guys that are there.
Yeah, for sure. And a player that I talked to once kind of hit the nail on the head with it. And maybe it's not so much at that level, but even still, it kind of is those players that play in college, all that money's going into the facilities and all that because you're on a scholarship, right? Like everything's through the school. that money is now going into the players' pockets when you're at a club in Germany. So all that money that you want, it's not, you get one or the other. Sure, they could probably get you a whirlpool, but then do you not want to have a salary anymore? Like, you kind of got to take one with the other.
Yeah, exactly. Got to pick. Money has to go somewhere. Like, it's and not to mention the endowment at some of these colleges. Oh my goodness, it's crazy. Yeah. And the football and the trickle down that comes into soccer makes a big difference.
Absolutely. So the first official trial then is kind of the Haifa trial in Israel, right? That's the first experience, I guess, where we're, kind of in a pro environment and hoping to sign that first contract.
Yep, the Haifa one. It's funny because the Haifa one was probably the highest level I ever played at. Well, trained in.
Yeah.
Probably played against better teams, but in terms of the training environment, I started at the highest and trickled my way. So I wonder now, like, if 2 years ago, whatever, if I went there, how I would have done. But when I went there at that time, I was not good. Like, I shouldn't have been. It's not like I think I should have been signed. No, I wasn't good enough, and that was it. And they were better. And I mean, that's just life. But
yeah, I'm really curious about that, because how are you able to, kind of remove yourself from that trial and still understand that there is a level for me out there? Because I wonder if a player would go and see, okay, this is the professional level, and if I'm not here right now, how is there a path for me able to do that? Do you just kind of have an awareness of, I can go to a Germany or an Austria and play in the lower leagues or work my way up? Like, did you already kind of have those contacts and connections to understand it? Or was that a tough thing to go through, like going into your first pro trial and then being like, shit, I'm not here yet. I'm not at this level.
Yeah. I mean, I think I had a general understanding from the PDL because I saw like ex-pros in the league, and I was playing with some of them, and I kind of knew, like, they're a couple of years older than me, but they're not that, like, they're good, but they're not amazing. I can play at the level they played at. So I had a bit of that. But then also in Israel, there were actually two other American guys. One was Daniel Haber, who was at Cornell at the same time as me. He went over like 2 weeks before me. Probably took the spot I could have had. And he was a good player, but he wasn't better than me. And there was another guy, Noah Sadawi. They signed both of them, but before I got there. But it was literally like 2 weeks before I got there, they both had been signed. So it was a weird kind of situation. But I was hanging out with them, and I knew them, played with them. I knew they weren't incredible players compared to me, and neither one of them played really much for the first team at Haifa. But Haber got a couple games, and then Noah got loaned out to a second division team in Israel. And I kind of compared it, and I was like, and I saw the second division, and I'm like, I could play there for sure. Yeah. And then while I was there, sometimes the first team would have games, and I would train with the reserves, like the under 23s or whatever it was, with Haifa, and I would do very well there. Okay. So I was like, something here for me if I can get an opportunity. And I even said to Haifa, I was like, what you did with Noah, like, can you just give me a team in the second division? I'll go play there. And they were like, no, and whatever. That's their bit. That they can do that, no problem. But I felt as though if I got that chance of second division and I did well, then maybe I could get, maybe not Haifa, because at that time they were like one of the top 3 teams in the league, the top division, maybe a team in 8th place. So I did feel, and right away, that there has to be something out there for me eventually.
Yeah. And so thus sort of kicked off the span of your career that I heard you mention. It was like kind of one of the most stressful, but also one of the most exciting, because it was like bouncing around to all these different places on trial. And so how do you think that time in your career and your life sort of shapes the career that you have now?
I think it's everything. I think anytime I get a little too, this is not good enough, blah, 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 I kind of think back to those times. But I think the big thing that I learned then was, first, you can't really worry too much about like the outside. Because for instance, I was the first player drafted in MLS by Binghamton, right? Yep. From Binghamton drafted in MLS. So I'm getting a lot of an attention from that. And for the first, whatever it was, like 8 months after the draft, I wasn't signed. I was trialing with places. So you kind of feel like almost a little bit embarrassed, like almost like a fraud a bit. Like you're like, all right, am I even a pro? Which technically I wasn't at the time. I didn't have a contract. So, but then people kind of assume you are because you were drafted, and how American sports work is if you're drafted, you're a pro. Like that's kind of how it works. So like that period of my career was kind of like, I had to stop you couldn't worry at all about the other stuff and just worry about, all right, how can I best progress my career forward? How can I find an opportunity somewhere? I mean, like, I went on an odyssey. It was like Haifa to Austria. Then I came back to the US with a Harrisburg and the Cosmos, and they all said no. Then I went back to Austria with Lustenau, and then also a third division team. And the third division team wanted me. It was the first team that was like, which is third division in Austria is a pretty good level. Like you can make good money. Like guys, some work part-time jobs, but some don't. But like the level was good. I was happy with it. But then because like the agent didn't realize that the third division, there was a different deadline for foreigners, like a different transfer deadline. So I couldn't sign there. So then I was like, all right, what am I going to do? And sure enough, friend got me involved in Germany. I mean, it's just whatever, 3-4 hour train ride that I took. And there were two teams. It was Darmstadt, obviously, and then it was TSG Usingen, both in the 6th tier, the Verbandsliga. Actually, it was in the same league, so I ended up playing against Usingen. And I went to Darmstadt first. They were initially like, yes, absolutely, let's go. And then Usingen was also interested, but Darmstadt just seemed like they were more interested. They were going to give us housing and everything. So I went there. There was one other American there at the time. So that just seemed like the right call. And that's kind of like that. But that whole 8 months was all building up to this 6th division team that was probably on par with my college team, which was not even that good of a team. The PDL was probably a slightly higher level. So it's like this whole thing is like you're building up. You're like, all right, MLS, no. Maccabi Haifa, no. And then you're like, all right, Austria Lustenau, which was 2nd division in Austria, which is, again, Erste League is like fully professional, very good league. They're like, maybe, because that was more, at that time, I was like, I think I could play this level. But there were only about 5 foreigners, and they said no. And then you're like working down, you're like, all right, 3rd division Austria. They say yes, but it doesn't work out. And you're just like slowly working your way down until finally something works out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to have, I'm sure you've spoken about it a lot and you can credit, success in your career to this, but you just have to have such a mental fortitude to just become accustomed to saying no. And you kind of just have to change your relationship with the word. Like, it's almost like if a team says no, you just have to accept it. And as we both know, it could be for any variety of reasons. Often, sometimes it could be, well, you're not good enough, but there's also a lot of times where you're good enough, but these foreign players, transfer window, et cetera, is the reason why you can't sign. So how many trials would you say maybe it was in total before you actually had, I mean, depending on the way you look at it, whether you count that Germany one as kind of your first one or not. Because I feel a lot of players have a similar story to that, where there's a road to get there.
Yeah, I would say, so it was Haifa 1, 2 FC Lustenau, 3 Harrisburg City Islanders, New York Cosmos 4, 5 Austria Lustenau, and then 6 FC Hod, or whatever, however you pronounce it.
Yes,
that's then TSG Usingen, and then I guess 9 would be Darmstadt. I think that was all of them.
9 in total. So with a player who's about to embark on that journey like that, without just flat out saying, hey, the first trial isn't going to work out, how do you prep a player that's going into that first trial and it's like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to kill it, I'm going to sign, because you want to go in with that mentality every single time. But you're a player who's now played in the USL League One for a number of years and at a high level, and you're saying, yeah, it took me 9 trials to just get my career off the ground. What do you say?
I mean, I don't know. You just you gotta go in, and same thing with the facilities, same thing with the housing, same thing with everything. You have to go in and you have to be prepared for no, be prepared for shit facilities.
Yep.
And if things are great, but you can't go in expecting things to go perfectly. You have to go in and you obviously do your best. You have to have confidence in yourself, of course. I mean, that's basic. But in terms of the off the field mentality of rejection, you have to just accept it and then know that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like that on the field mentality, that maybe you brought a level of seriousness to it, and maybe off the field as well when you were in Germany, led you to getting that first real opportunity where you were able to go over to Ireland?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So it was actually the same guy that He is a guy who worked with Westchester Flames, Dave Harris. He's like he calls himself my advocate. Mm-hmm. He's gotten me like every team bar FC Edmonton. He's somehow helped me orchestrate the deal. He's basically my agent, but he's not. You can get 8 in jerseys and that's it. He's happy about it. He's a guy I did the podcast with. Yep. But yeah, he emailed, he worked at the Flames, and he emailed me. We didn't really know each other that well. He just said, I have an opportunity in Germany. I was like, all right, I'll take it. I'll go for it. And then while I was in Germany, I was only there for the first half of the season, which is 3 months, played less than 20 games with them, did well, scored goals, but it wasn't necessarily like if I wasn't playing in Germany, it would have been harder to get to Ireland, but it wasn't like they were watching my games and scouting me. That's not what was happening. They were like, oh, this guy's playing in Germany, scoring some goals. Let's have a look at him. And he had a good relationship with Liam Buckley, who was the coach at St. Pat's, which at that time they had won the league in Ireland, the top division. And Liam, wouldn't have signed a player like me at that time, not established in any way, maybe a trial, but he couldn't have signed me based on the information he had. But he was friends with the new manager at Galway United, who were like, they went bankrupt, but they were coming back. So it's a good opportunity because it's a brand new squad, brand new coach. He has to sign 20 something new players. So Dave was like, hey, we have this opportunity in Galway. Do you want to take it? And I was like, of course. And then in the second division, which is where Galway were at the time, was definitely a better level than the sixth division in Germany. And again, it just gave me an opportunity to move up the ladder slightly. And the other great thing about playing in Europe is when you win the league, or in our case, when you get promoted, you actually get to play in a higher level, which is a novelty here in the US. We haven't quite heard of that.
Yeah. I've had the conversation with many players, and it was something that I liked about Europe was I just felt like everyone's natural ability, it sort of just you were able to find your natural ability very easily, right? Because a team has super success, then they're in the next level, and then if they get found out, then okay, you found exactly where your sweet spot is. Whereas oftentimes, I'm sure there's players who are in the USL Championship who maybe should be playing higher, or vice versa, should be playing lower. Like there's so much parity between all the leagues, and you can't really fix it because everyone's kind of fighting to be in the exact same position.
Yeah, and that's exactly. When we won 2020 with Greenville, like I'd be very curious how we would have done in the championship. Like I personally think we would have been a mid-table team. I don't think we would have been close to the playoffs, maybe not have made it, but we wouldn't have been bottom. Like just based on the friendlies we have with all these teams in preseason, just based on the US, like we wouldn't be bottom. So like, why not find out? And it's a lot easier then for our best player, whoever that may be that year, to then get a move to Louisville, who pays their players, looks after them, health insurance, has a 15,000 person stadium. Like that, in my opinion, like that's the way it has to be. And I think it will be in USL. MLS will probably always do their own thing, but USL, I think between the two leagues, they'll have some sort of promotion relegation, especially without the MLS teams. Once they leave, it'll be easier because it'll be mostly or pretty much all independent.
Yeah, independent clubs. Yeah. But as I recall hearing, the Galway trial wasn't exactly a trial that you were walking into the contract negotiations thinking, oh, hell yeah, they're about to put the contract on the table right now.
Yeah, you really did listen to that. Well done.
I did my research, man.
Yeah, so that trial, I went there and I definitely knew, like I was there 3 days the first weekend, and I definitely knew I could play at the level like that. I wasn't in over my head by any means, but it was just one of those like times where I just seemed to be hitting the post and like going around the keeper and like just missed chances. Like things didn't fall my way necessarily. And I felt like I was dangerous. Obviously I was doing well enough that the coach took a notice, but in my mind, I was like, I could be doing better. And I was kind of a little frustrated, but then it was literally 3 days. It was that Sunday. We were staying at the same hotel because he's from Cork, or he was living in Cork. His family's from Cork. So we're staying at the hotel. He's like, hey, meet me in the lobby. I was like, all right, here goes. And he was just like, no, we'd love to sign you, like, and to a contract that was way better than anything I was making in Germany, like a legitimate contract, like I could easily live off it, housing, everything. And I was like, of course, yes, of course. I was kind of surprised. But looking back, it was obviously great decision by him, because over the next 2 years, that was definitely the most prolific of my career. And I love playing for the guy, Tommy Dunn, the legend.
That's awesome, man. What's that emotion like? I mean, maybe besides that first initial, whatever surprise, what's that emotion like to have all the work that you've put in for so long kind of come to a culmination and being able to put pen to paper like that?
I'm not the right person to ask. I don't get very excited about things like that. Be perfectly honest. It's like there's probably the 2 times I've kind of sat back and be like, all right, this is really cool, was after seasons, like when we got promoted with Galway, one with Greenville. But at the time of signing contracts, especially when the contract, like the Galway situation, like I'm still like the season has started, we're in preseason. Like I'm not going to sit back and this is awesome. Like, no, we have training the next day. So really had a moment where I was like, yes, I've made it, or any of that nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, it's the pros mentality. Like, it's as soon as you sign, okay, well, now it's how can I go and dominate training? And then it's how can I get myself into the team? And then it's how can I score goals? Like there just isn't there isn't a stop to that, the way that your brain has to work, I feel like, to be successful in that level.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Always on to the next thing. That's what I mean. I don't know if it's the healthiest way always mentally on your life, but I think it's the best way as an athlete to think about it. No matter who you are, whether you're Ronaldo. I mean, look at Ronaldo, Messi, Lewandowski, all these guys. These guys score outrageous amounts of goals. They win trophies. I'm not even going to reference the Ballon d'Or anymore because they took it away from Lewandowski. It's not a legitimate trophy in my mind. And I'm not joking. It's disgrace what they did. I'm sure they listen to this podcast. But these guys win all these different things. And the next year, Ronaldo in particular, like the way this man is so hungry to score goals, it's incredible. And he's just never satisfied and never going to be on that level. But you can kind of have a similar mentality to the way they think.
Yeah, I'm happy that you brought that up, because a couple of friends of mine were talking about the Juventus documentary, or kind of how they followed their season. And they were just talking about how, at this point in his career, Ronaldo had already won the Champions League, multiple times. And then he's in the dressing room and he's in tears because they've just been knocked out. And I think, a normal person would look at that and be like, and maybe with a mindset of, man, you've already won it. You've achieved the pinnacle of everything almost there is to offer in this game. And still every single moment, every single trophy matters that much. Like,
yes. And that is, you could argue it's for the cameras. I think that's 100% genuine.
I agree.
And I think that's just how they all think. And to be really successful about something, with anything, you have to care a lot, and they clearly do. Yeah.
It's like you said in the beginning, it kind of comes down to like, what are you willing to sacrifice, right? Like, first of all, what are you willing to sacrifice just to try and become a pro and then stay a pro? And then for those guys, it's try to become the best to ever do it, the best to ever play the game. It's just, there's levels to this.
That's the beauty of it. There is drastic levels to this.
And you mentioning some of the the top forwards, the top strikers in the game right now. What is kind of your thought process of being a forward, in that sometimes you can be in what you feel like is great form, you're dangerous, you're doing the right things for your team, but you can't, for whatever reason, the ball just not going to the back of the net, or vice versa. Because from my perspective, I always felt as a defender, it was like, I could play well, but if I'm not contributing to an attack, right? Like, I'm not putting in crosses, I'm not assisting. Statistically or on paper, maybe it doesn't seem as if I'm a player that's worth a look. Maybe is the flip side of that. Do you feel like, is there an argument for a forward, whereas you feel, hey, I'm a player that can do a job for your team, but just for whatever reason right now, the goals aren't going in the back of the net?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, because like, I look at it as when you're in lower leagues, like lower, like Darmstadt, even like maybe second division Ireland, to some extent, it's a lot harder to get a reputation without stats or the highlights, that which is the goals, the assists, etc. And I look at it now, like a good level, like League One, like the Premier Division in Ireland, like NASL with Edmonton, like those, like defensively, I'm almost jealous of players because I feel like it's so easy to remain consistent and do your job, and not easy is a relative term. I don't think you guys just stand around and do nothing, but sometimes you do. But but I think because
I heard the absolute disrespect of right backs on the podcast. It was like, oh yeah, I could probably do that.
I feel like I could. I
mean, a lot of players, they go through their career, they think they're a striker, they think they're a center midfielder. All of a sudden, they find themselves at right back. Was I one of those players? I'm not going to say yes or no, but you can read between the lines.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. It's like, every position is difficult on the field. Fullbacks actually, and a lot of times, cover the most ground. It's a lot straight line, which makes it a little bit easier, but it's you cover the most ground on the field besides maybe center mids. Sometimes wingers cover more ground. Like we have the GPS on our vest all the time. So, but yeah, as a striker, your mentality your job is to score goals. Your job is to set up goals. And when it doesn't happen once, when it doesn't happen for a couple games, it wears on you. And it happens to me. It happens to everyone. The best of the best, maybe not as much, but especially at our level, where it's like the service isn't always perfect, the pitch isn't always great, the games are oftentimes a little bit more physical and scrappy than they would be at like a Bayern Munich or wherever. Yeah. So like Lewandowski, the chances he gets are very consistently, like he knows he's going to get 4 chances a game for the most part, and he knows where he has to be on the field to get those chances. Whereas when you get to lower levels, even like Championship, League One, like very good levels, like the ball isn't always coming in the same way. Maybe it's getting short hop to you, and you have to hit it on the half volley, and it's all these little things that. Yes, you miss chances, but then also you're like, all right, when's my next one coming? And then that's when kind of the mental part of it becomes more and more difficult.
When you were in Galway, do you feel like the surroundings that you had, the team that you were in, was that, a club and a team that suited the way that you wanted to play and kind of played to your strengths a little bit?
Absolutely. I think, first off, the second year in particular, like he always played me 90 minutes no matter what, and he had ultimate faith in me. I think the Irish game suits me, in St. Pat's too, and I played a little bit less in St. Pat's, but I thought when I played, I thought I did well. I scored, etc. But I think the game suits me because it's high pace, meaning there's balls in behind, we're pressing. It's not like a slow, methodical build up, which I don't think suits me as well. And also when you get the ball wide, put the ball in the box. And I know, even though I'm not the biggest, I've scored a lot of goals in my head, and I can get on the end of things. And that also you ask questions of defenders. Like when the ball's in, maybe the defender goes to clear it and it falls right to you for a tap in. And if you don't, and that was my biggest issue this year with Madison, we wouldn't do that. And I would have conversations with the coach, and he was like, no, we want to, when we get the ball in wide areas, we want to bring it back and around and like recirculate. And I'm like, all right, that's great if you're Man City, but we're not. So, and that was my biggest issue this year with Madison. And it's like, that's why the Irish game, I think, suits me well, because the weather plays into it too, because you can run all day when it's 50 degrees and raining. Whereas in the US, there's a lot of games in the summer, especially where it's 85 degrees hot, and you just physically can't play that style. But yeah, the Irish game suited me to a T. And having the faith of the manager, which I definitely had, is always huge. Yeah.
And then, so did that second year of success at Galway kind of lead into you choosing to come back to the NASL with Edmonton, or was it, talk us through maybe that process?
At that time I was like 24, 25, I want to say 25. And my thought process at that time was, okay, I was in it 2 years ago. I was drafted in MLS. I think I can still maybe get a chance there.
Okay.
What's the route to doing that? And when I was in Galway, I was a little frustrated. I knew the reality, but I was getting a team, not in England, but a couple teams in Scotland think League One, maybe champion. I think it was just League One, which is the third tier, but it's a good level, like a place that I would have loved to go. And they would reach out, teams would reach out, and then I'd be like, do you have a European passport? No. Okay, well then I knew. So I was not hugely frustrated. Like I knew I could probably go to either a better team in Ireland or stay at Galway. I definitely could have stayed at Galway. They offered me a new deal. But I was just, at that time, I was like, all right, what can I do next to try to get up to the next level, which the NASL had crazy players in it, like huge names. And if I do well there, then probably I'll have a chance at my age at that time to get an MLS look, whether it's preseason, whether it's a signing, etc. So that was just my thought process. I just wanted to go to the next level and test myself, because I didn't want to be comfortable. I didn't want to just stay at Galway, like do my stuff and that just be it. I wanted to see, okay, how far can I take this?
Yeah. So part of it for you, I feel like this is a little bit in my career thus far too. Part of it for you is like trying to find where's that like limit, like where do I truly fall? Because I think it's still something for me I haven't really quite found. Is that part of it for you, especially in those earlier years where you're finding a club and navigating through different markets and all that type of thing? It's like, where's the limit where it's like just beyond my reach and let me go one step below that?
Yeah, that's pretty much kind of what I was thinking. I think also when you play at higher levels, if you play it above your limit, you get better.
Yeah.
I think that was part of my thinking as well. How can I get better? And then maybe my limit will increase, and maybe I'll play at a higher level than I ever would have to begin with. Yeah.
So how would you surmise your FC Edmonton experience, that contract?
Summary. It has to be short. No, the first year was great. Like we had a lot of really experienced players. We had two guys who played first team games with Man United. Like we had experienced guys from Ireland, wow. Guys who had played in MLS, like guys that I enjoyed playing with, enjoyed being around. And we had the best season in the club's history. And like I played every game, started most of the games, and like I was enjoying it. I was playing out wide left, which I played it in Galway, but I kind of wanted to play more through the middle. I like playing. If I had a choice, I wouldn't always play one position. Like one game, maybe 5 games in a row, I'll play up front. Mm-hmm. Maybe 5 games I'll play as a 10. Maybe a couple of games I'll play out wide. Less so now, but back then anyway. And that's what would happen at Galway, and I felt like it suited me. Whereas in Edmonton, it was very much just out wide on the left, and I was getting frustrated because our style was very, very defensive. And after the first year, I had an option, but I wanted to leave, and I asked the coach if I could leave, and he was like, basically just said no. And that was frustrating for me because, options are part of the game. It's a business, but it was frustrating because I felt like if I would have moved at that time, I could have kicked on again, because the first year was decent enough. I was happy with it. But then what happened was Edmonton, the second year, was a disaster. A couple players left, a couple things happened off the field. The coach was just lost the plot basically, and things just went downhill quickly. And that was the worst year definitely of my career. And it was at an age where like I was 26, 27, where I should have been having one of the best years of my career. So that was just a frustrating thing. And that brought me from like, I'm going up Galway, second division, do well, first division, do well, NASL first year, do well. And the second year didn't do well. And that was the time when the NASL folded. There was fewer jobs because USL wasn't as big as it is now. There was no League One. So that was the one off season that I've had since the first year, since the 8 months of trials, there was a long period where I didn't know where I was going to play. So that was tough.
Is that one of the toughest things that you think to go through as a player, is that kind of off-season limbo where you're trying to find a team, and like you said, maybe you've come off a season where things have gone less than stellar and you're on this linear progression, and now it's like there's the kind of a downtick. Do you feel like that's kind of, maybe barring injury, right? Is that one of the toughest things to go through as a pro?
Yeah. There's so many tough things. It's hard to pick one, but yeah, that's definitely one of them. I think when you're told no at the beginning, you lose confidence, mm-hmm. and you have to that. But when you kind of make or quote unquote make it, and then you're knocked down a peg, that's almost harder, because then you're like, all right, is my time up? Is it time to go get a real job? Is it time to, I don't know, propose to my wife or whatever other bullshit people want to do in their lives? So like that a lot of guys at my level, that's when they retire, is like 27, 28, 29. They start they have a kid. They want to make more consistent salary. They want to live in a place for a consistent amount of time. And I mean, that's their choices. And that's that, like, I very easily could have fallen into that path at that time, because for a long time I didn't have anything worthwhile. And lucky enough, my buddy Dave saves me again. With St. Pat's.
Shouts out Dave.
What a guy. You're gonna have to tag him in the podcast.
Absolutely. So there's something interesting that I heard you kind of say in the podcast that you did with the footwork guys, and it speaks to, like, in that time where you're out of a team, right, and you're looking for that next opportunity, how do you have the mentality to just keep going ahead? You know, when you see other guys that maybe say, oh, okay, it's just my time, I don't want to go through the process of scrambling to find a team, or not scrambling is not the right word, but, you know, going through my network and trying to find connections and stuff like that. You know, what drives you, what keeps motivating you, you know, because obviously, you know, I can sense there's other things that maybe don't motivate you quite so much as where what other guys are like, oh yeah, you know, time to get a family, time to get a real job, time to settle down. You know, I can tell you're not at that point where you're like, yeah, I want all that shit right now. I still want to chase this a little bit. I mean, maybe I just answered my own question, but is that kind of what you were thinking? It's just, I still want to, I can't stop chasing this yet.
Yeah. I mean, my whole thing is from the beginning was I want to play at the highest level I possibly can for as long as I possibly can. And that's my goal. And that, like, to sum it all up, that's it. So I mean, at that time I had played like 5-6 years maybe, and I wanted to play 10 or 15 or whatever possible. And I also wanted to get to a higher level if I could, and just keep, and then obviously when you get to it's more like, that's like the broad goal. But then for me, when I get to individual teams, that's when I start making, like, we as a team make goals of like, let's win the league, or let's win a cup, or whatever competitions you're in. But for me, like, for a career as a whole, like, the goal is just simply like play as long as I can at the highest level I can, and that's it. Yeah. And anything else after that is great in terms of like different experiences or people you meet or whatever. But the goal purely from a soccer point of view is that.
Yeah. And this may be a bit of a loaded question, but what would you say is your kind of relationship with football, with soccer? Because I heard you say something kind of like, you're like, I don't know if I necessarily love like playing, which may sound weird to those that are listening, but you kind of become addicted to the grind of it all, right? Addicted to like training and keeping your body in peak condition, and like the routine, right? The regiment of it, and pushing, like we talked about, that mentality as well. Like, I guess, you know, part of it is what would you say is your kind of relationship with football? And is it different than the 12-year-old Jake who is going into a game at the weekend? Like, what's, you know, talk to me about those two guys.
Like, okay, like from, I mean, probably till like 25 or so, at least from 5 to 25, it was pure, like, I just love playing, and that's it. Like, that's the only thing. And like when you're 15 years old, you play high school, you're a freshman in high school, you play and you get all this attention. Like, I just love playing. That's it. Yeah. And now it's kind of changed, and I've always loved the competition of it. I've loved the trying to get better. Like, that was part of it too. Whereas now I feel like I mean, I enjoy playing. It's not like I don't hate playing. It's just, I feel like now what's overtaking the love of the game is just more the desire to keep doing it and keep trying to improve. And I enjoy just as much, if not more, like in the off season, for instance, you do field sessions and you do this stuff in the gym. I enjoy the stuff in the gym possibly more. And not only for myself, but also for the kids that I coach, high schoolers, a lot of time. I enjoy helping them in the gym probably more than I enjoy helping them on the field. And I think I mean, you could say whatever you want about that, but I think like I've just kind of gotten like I've soccer. I mean, the game it knocks you down a lot, obviously.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's always there, barring injury or whatever, is your ability to go out and try to improve yourself. And the stuff, I always kind of joke that sometimes I love parts of team sports, don't get me wrong, but I always joke, I almost wish I played tennis, because tennis, I feel like, fits my mentality perfectly. It's solely you. Obviously you have an opponent, but it's 100% on you. Whereas some of the parts that I kind of don't like about the game is like so often, like, especially as a striker, which is why I'm jealous of right backs. I feel like your game is much more just like, did I stop the winger or not? Whereas as a striker, especially a striker like me, who's not like, I'm not beating people 1v1.
Yep.
That's not the kind of player I am. So I'm relying on my right winger to put in a good cross, or my center midfielder not to take 7 touches. And yes, of course, sometimes I'm relying on myself to finish a chance. I miss plenty, like, don't get me wrong. But what sometimes frustrates me about the game, and like you have a bad game sometimes and you didn't even like feel like you did anything. Like, you felt great physically. You felt like if you were put in better positions, you would have had a great game.
Yeah.
Whereas in tennis, you had a good game or you didn't. And yes, the opponent can beat you, but did you have unforced errors? Did you have, were your serves good? Like, that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah. And I mean, with individual sports, it's even more clear cut than, as we were speaking about before. Yes, promotion and relegation in Europe eliminates a little bit of the parity that is presented in the game, but tennis, it's clear as day. Like, if the other guy is just way better than you, then it's going to be apparent from the first serve. That's interesting. I haven't really heard that argument before. Do you think that a player that wants to pursue the game at a high level, do you think that they have to have a specific motivation in doing so? Meaning, like, a lot of people say you can't be in it for the money, because you're probably not going to get a lot of money at the start. You have to just do it for the love of the game. But I think there's kind of like some nuance to that, in that, like, for you, your motivation has changed now from where you were a couple of years ago in your career to now. And, maybe there are some players who think, I want to make the most amount of money that I can for my family, and this is something that I'm really skilled at. Like, maybe I don't, that's why a lot of people work jobs that aren't football. And some people realize, hey, I'm a really good footballer, so let me see if I can make the most amount of money I possibly can for my family. What do you think about just, the motivation to kind of pursue something like being a professional soccer player?
I think you can have a million different motivations. I think that one, you see, that's a lot of times why the best players, the most successful players, are the ones that came from nothing, because they have that, built-in toughness, you can say, but also they have the motivation purely financial. It's life and death. Like, if they don't make enough money, then that's it. Like, their family won't eat, or they won't have housing, etc. So yeah, I think there's a million different reasons. I think it's difficult when you start at a low level where you're basically not making anything. That's when it becomes more difficult. If you're only obsessed with money and you're going to go from a shitty contract to a slightly less shitty contract, it's tough to then, for 3-4 years, the time it could take, if that's your only motivation is money and you're not making it. More power to you if you can stick with it, but that's where it becomes difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, because I'm sure you're a busy guy, but as we're approaching into as we're approaching into this season, obviously re-signing with the Triumph, excited to be a part of, the project, as you spoke about before. What are the expectations for the season? What are you looking forward to? Paint the picture for the listeners.
So when coming back to a team that has been very successful, the expectations are to like we said, like, just continue to improve, embrace the, what's the highest level we can play at throughout the season. And obviously you want to win, but it's difficult to make that your solitary goal, because again, Omaha this year were very, very good. I don't think they'll be as good next year, but there could be a team that comes in, like Charlotte's dropped down for the championship. Maybe there's a team that's just better than us, and you have to. understand that. And if Barcelona comes into our league, we're not going to win the league. So I think our goals throughout the year, just improve as a club, improve as individuals, improve as a collective unit throughout the year. And then hopefully by the end we'll be in the playoffs, winning things. And that's where I see my role. I want to help the team win in whatever capacity that is, whether it's scoring 15 goals. I mean, that'd be awesome. If it's coming off the bench and scoring goals or making key contributions, that'd be great too. And I think that's kind of going back to one of the first questions we talked about, is like the difference between kind of how I thought before and how I think now. Is my job is to contribute to the team winning. And yes, me playing well contributes to that, but my sole purpose can't be, I need to score this amount of goals or put this amount of clips on my people, like I need to get something from my highlight video in the game, or like I need to no, it's about how can we help Greenville win? How can we help us get better? And that's really should be the only goal. How can we have fun? Enjoy it too. But
and so your mindset usually when you go into a season, and maybe this could be advice for players, is kind of, let me go in and give everything I can to this season and then worry about, whatever's next or whatever's after the fact when that time comes, because I think sometimes players get in that habit of like you said, let me get as many highlight clips as I can. Let me get as many statistics as I can so that I can parlay this into my next contract. And from what I've gathered, that's kind of, you try and steer away from doing that.
Yeah. And I think if you have that mentality, unless you're very, very good, you're not going to last very long. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. Because you kind of get just too far ahead of yourself. I know it's something that I experienced a lot, and I've had to work on, and just as a player and just in life in general. Like if you're so constantly worried about, and there's a balance too, like you said, as an athlete, you have to look towards what's next. But if that's all that you're doing the whole time, it's like all of a sudden you look back, you're like, shit, I didn't even experience what I was in. I wasn't in the present for all of that.
Yeah. Didn't learn, didn't enjoy it. What's the point?
Yeah.
It's just the next thing. What's the thing? Will we click? Let me fast forward life through through this part and get to my next club. And then your next club never comes.
Yeah. And then you get to a point, you're like, oh shit, I actually wish I could rewind it. It's crazy.
You can't.
So the question that everyone has been waiting for, what's the podcast situation? Is it coming back? Is there a return? Will there be more episodes? Maybe 2022. I don't know. The people want aristocrats.
Do they? Do they know? Does anybody want aristocrats?
I have no idea.
No, there's no plans in the immediate future. I definitely enjoyed it while we did it. It was really fun talking to all great guests. There's still actually some people that I talk to now that I never met before on Instagram or whatever. And
really,
that's pretty cool. But no plans to bring out hiatus. We will leave the content up for our loyal 3 listeners. We will keep the Instagram active. If you want to DM us and beg us for more episodes, there's begs, we will consider it, or payment. We'll take payment.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, everyone's got a price, right? If somebody's got a big sponsorship deal lined up, who knows?
Yeah, if you want to sponsor us, you want to give me some free gear, Puma, whatever, I'll put some podcasts out. I'll put some content out for you. But until then, no, it was a good experience. Definitely learned a lot. Like it was awesome. Like even just break the editing parts of it and learn how to ask questions. I think that's a valuable skill and something I felt like I was pretty comfortable at. So yeah, it was pretty fun, but I think we're
next one. Do you have an episode or two that sticks with you as maybe a favorite or most interesting, or maybe ones that if the listeners stumble across it, they could check it out?
Well, depending on who your listeners are, which side of the fence they sit on, Jeff Cameron's a very controversial one. And it was awesome. Like he was very open about things with the national team in 2017 when they didn't qualify for the 2018 World Cup, and how Bruce Arena's handling of everything in regards to him and the team, and also some political things and life things. And he was very open, which was pretty awesome. And to have a guy like that sat with us for over an hour while he was at QPR and wherever he was, I think he was QPR at the time. Crazy. Also, we had a lot of really good women's guests. Who's one that sticks out? It's a tough one. I'm sure I'm missing another good one. There was Dave had a couple good ones as well with like kind of older guys who had been involved in the national team or like in the 90s, kind of at the beginning. Those were really interesting. Sofia Huerta was an interesting one because she had played for Mexico and the U.S. on the women's side. She plays for the OL Reign. But yeah, just scroll through it. I'm sure you can find something. Well, I'll check the views, and if they're going up, maybe we'll bring out another episode.
All right. Thank you so much, Jake, for popping in today and sharing your story and a lot of good advice and insight for those that are listening. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. These are always fun to do.
Awesome. Best of luck and speak soon.
That's it.
Bye-bye. That was the episode. I want to thank Jake again for coming on the pod, sharing his story with myself and with all of you. I want to thank all of you guys for listening and for continuing to listen week after week. We definitely have some more exciting episodes coming up, so continue to tune in, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're listening on right now. Tell your friends about the pod, all that kind of good stuff, because the episodes are going to keep on rolling in. So I appreciate all of you for listening out there, and we'll catch you again soon. Peace.